All right, well, it's a Monday, and it's definitely no short of activity within the crypto markets. Of course, we're going to be breaking down all that for you guys today, including maybe a live stream of Larry Fink. We'll dive in deep. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, so a couple things happened. If you were just now catching up to what's going on in the markets right now, we had some fake news out there in the market of a potential ETF approval by for BlackRock. All that proved to be a bad thing, was not true. But it did impact the markets in a very significant way. And of course, I don't know if timing here for Larry Fink going on to Fox Business was indicative of this, or if there were some other things that may be brewing around a potential actual approval this week. We'll see how all this plays out. Eleanor Terrett hit it earlier this morning. On that note, it's actually great to tee up our segment with BlackRock CEO Larry Fink today at 3:30. We're going to try to broadcast that for you guys, make sure that it is coming on to, they're just now doing another segment on Microsoft. They'll probably be bringing Fink on here shortly. I do want to jump to a clip real quick for you from Ray Dalio, and we'll get into what this means and the macro effect of where and what this could mean for not only the crypto markets, but maybe the more broader impact on all global markets, a lot of that. So I'm going to jump over here to this clip real quick, and I'll go ahead and get this going for you. Let's play this one.
Hard money, or do you pay it back with printed devalued money? And if you pay it back with hard money, it's hard. In other words, that's when you have debt crises. So in all cases, they eventually print money, and that produces inflation, right? So that dynamics, the first...
And that's the place we are at this moment.
That's the place we are at this moment. Okay. And we'll talk about that.
We'll drill down on that.
In a minute. The second is when there's a great internal conflict. Usually when there's a large wealth and values gap, and at the same time as you have a financial problem. Then you get populism of the left and populism of the right. In other words, those who feel disenfranchised want people who are going to fight for them. They don't want compromisers. They don't want them to be in the middle, because middle means that they're not fighting for them. They want them to have guts. So that you have populists of the left and populists
and
of
their
the
positions
right.
harden.
And their positions harden, and there are no compromises. That's why we're potentially in a situation that you could see in one of these elections, maybe in 2024, that neither side would accept losing. Perhaps we see that. Maybe you don't follow the rulings of the Supreme Court. Anyway.
That's a serious question today.
So these things have not happened in our lifetime, but they happened many times in history. So if you look at that, you see from those patterns why the gaps become greater and the positions harden, and you see the dynamic. So that's the second. And the third is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing great power. In other words, I gave you the example of how the United States was so dominant in 1945. Now it's not as dominant. It is not dominant. In other words, China and the opposition is as strong as the United States and its allies. And so we have a conflict. And there are 5 kinds of wars. And they start in this order, just sequentially, typically. A trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war. Then you get into a capital and economic warfare, which we are now with sanctions. They always happened in history. And then there's a military war. And so you could see that progression happen through time. And that creates a template. So I like to look at the template and then plot dots to see how we're transpiring relative to that template.
All right, so as you guys can kind of see, there's a couple of things happening there from what Ray Dalio was talking about. And really what he's alluding to is what is going to potentially roll out in terms of a shift of power. And of course, a shift of power does mean currency, and the global currency being the dollar really starts to play into this. Big factors kind of are at bay right now. Obviously, what Dalio is kind of referring to was what he was talking about here, and that is he believes there's a 50% chance of World War III erupting. And this is not only from global, the pandemic and the lockdown to potential issues, really what's happening overseas. The factor this gets into is really more on a financial aspect. And I think that's the thing that we want to continue to look at. Now, of course, a Bitcoin ETF and movement into this market definitely has some impact on how some of these markets are going to be exploding. The other thing that's going to play into this is, of course, and I'm just checking in to make sure that Fink has not come on yet, but the other thing that's going to play into this, of course, is where does those power centers start to erupt from? And I think that's what Dalio was trying to point out, was that there is a subtle shift of power, kind of very slow and then all at once, that seems to be brewing. I listen to this guy quite a bit. I often will question some of his positions on finance, but when he gets into global macroeconomics, this is one of the guys that I do listen to. So it's very interesting and I think strategic position that he's observing right now with what's happening in the United States. Where does that mean, and what does that mean for Bitcoin? What does that mean for crypto and for the alternative markets? What I think is going to start to continue to brew out here is the scenarios of valuation of the dollar. And obviously the dollar is going to be in a very interesting position. What is the alternative asset that potentially could blow into? Remember that energy, inflation, and of course access to energy is going to be a big part of this. If we enter a war in the Middle East, then obviously we will see pretty significant pushes toward everything from energy stocks to obviously war stocks, so to speak. But really the question will be is how well does the dollar hold up? And they're continuing on in there. Hopefully Fox will be going live here in a second. I do want to show you a couple other things. And then by the way, don't forget, if you guys are maybe brand new to our channel, we've been trying to get ready to start doing a lot more live streams. Obviously the bear market is kind of, posing that a little bit of a challenge. But smash the like button right now and make sure and give us a little bit of love, because that does help this get out there, and it helps us understand if you guys do like live streams. If you do have some questions, make sure and drop some questions over on the sidebar as well, and we'll get into some of those things. One thing I want to hit on about BlackRock and why this is such an intriguing ETF to me is if you guys have been following BlackRock for very long, you're going to remember that Larry Fink was probably one of the key people that was in charge, well, I'll actually say he was in charge of the ESG movement. Now, what was ESG, if that's brand new to you? That is environmental sustainable governance. Basically, it's kind of the green movement that the globe had kind of put out. And when I say globe, meaning governments, a lot of major corporations, and BlackRock was one of the companies that really stood behind that. The problem that when they, of course, initiated an ETF was that it was for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin doesn't necessarily fall directly in line with the parameters or the principles behind ESG. So guess what? With that being the case, BlackRock and Vanguard now were once ESG's biggest proponents. Now they seem to be reversing course. And I think this was something that Eric Balchunas and I talked a little bit about on a recent interview. And he hit on it right on the head. And he said, listen, it's all capitalism. At the end of the day, BlackRock is this is going to be a great asset for them, meaning the ETF. This is going to be a great asset for them. It's going to be a great product. And they can't let ESG get in the way, essentially, is what it boils down to. So I think we are truly seeing this shift of time right now that's happening in the markets, that really it's capitalism at work, and especially a lot of these major financial institutions like BlackRock and others that are not necessarily worried about ESG as much anymore. In fact, this term has almost been dislodged from the nomenclature around just general conversation, both in media and in general use case. So I think business is starting to take a little different look at it. We'll see how this plays out going forward. Checking in on Fox Business, looks like Larry is still yet to be. Last time we did a live with Larry Fink, it was a little bit late coming on, so I wonder if that's kind of his shtick. But anyway, a couple of things that did happen this morning. We'll go to the Bitcoin chart real quick and show you guys just a quick move here. It looks like they're trying to get to it right now. But you'll notice here, I mean, look at this wick right here, flying up to almost 30K. And then, of course, Bitcoin has nestled in here on the 4-hour right now at around 28.4. So very, very interesting. I'd love to know if you guys were involved in trying to grab any Bitcoin at this time during this fake pump. Kind of curious how you played it. Did you play this as I'm going to wait and see, and I'm watching other assets? Because obviously Ethereum kind of did a similar thing, but a much less impact. This, of course, is on the 4-hour. Looks like Fink's coming on now. Let's pause and go to that. Listen in.
The first you've heard about this rumor, and what did you
Actually,
see?
I was busy all day. I probably heard it an hour ago, so it wasn't.
Yeah, well, we should point out Ellie Tourette, my producer, broke the story that it was not real. But it's like wishful thinking, isn't it? Isn't this what this is all about?
Well, I can't talk about the specifics of anything. I think it's just an example of the pent-up interest in crypto. And we're hearing from clients around the world about the need for crypto. I mean, when you think about, I think some of this rally is way beyond the rumor. I think the rally today is about a flight to quality with all the, all the issues around the Israeli war now, global terrorism. And I think there's more people running into a flight to quality, whether that is in treasuries, gold, or crypto, depending on how you think about it. And I believe crypto will play that type of role as a flight to quality.
Let me ask you this. Where do you think the markets go if, like, real hot war starts in the next couple of days?
I don't know what the definition of hot war is anymore.
Or an invasion.
My view is if the invasion is held to the southern borders of Israel, I think we are anticipating that already. I don't think the market's going to be changing that much. And it really depends on the oil market and how that plays out. I mean, obviously, the marketplace today is up, 350 points as we speak right now. The marketplace knows the potential reality. So I think that's somewhat into the market. And I've been asked all the time now, why is the market being so resilient with this, with now global terrorism, with what's going on in Israel, Ukraine, all the other issues? And I think we're not spending enough time talking about some of the great things that are going on in the world today. And that's when I think about technology and how that's going to be shaping and changing our world. When you think about AI and robotics, this is going to accelerate movement more towards nearshoring, onshoring. We're going to be able to use this new technology. We're going to be able to create more productivity.
You say onshore, more jobs here in the U.S.?
More jobs and more factories.
Oh, interesting. Because just the opposite is the theory that it's going to put people out of work.
But the CHIPS Act, of course, is certainly doing something.
There's no question technology displaces some and creates new. So I'm not trying to suggest it's a perfect situation for everybody. But what I'm trying to talk about is the optimism. There is a strong fundamental belief that technology is going to raise the value of financial assets because it's going to increase and enhance productivity. If you look at productivity in our world today, productivity has fallen, especially during
dramatically.
COVID.
Yeah.
And for countries that have declining populations, declining demographic, the role of technology can play a really incredible role. I know you spend a lot of time talking about the changes in pharma. And think about the transformation that drugs like Ozempic is doing for humanity. We're going to be changing, really deadly diseases into more chronic diseases. We're going to reshape humans' lives. The work that is being done in dementia and Alzheimer's in terms of the new class of drugs there, we're going to be extending life there too. So there is so much negativity going on, and a lot of it is rightfully so. But we're not spending enough time talking about the optimism,
Larry,
opportunities.
One of those negatives is inflation. It seems to be, and you've been way ahead of this. You told me that inflation was sticky. Last time we were here, it's still sticky. So what does this mean for interest rates?
Interest rates going to be higher for longer.
So they're going to raise it again, you think?
I think in December the Fed will raise one more time. I think they have to pause in November with what's going on in Israel.
Right.
But I think they'll raise one more time. Think about it now. Think about it now because of the global instability. We're going to be spending a lot more money in the world for defense.
Right.
That's inflationary. We're spending a lot more money on reshoring and onshoring. That's inflationary. All these things in the short run are inflationary, and so we're building up this, and we have also, you mentioned the CHIPS Act, we have the IRA, and we have the Infrastructure Act.
Yeah, so a couple of things here,
to create new jobs and new
not necessarily saying anything new. I'm going to comment on a couple of points he did make earlier.
People can be trained.
This might be a good question right here.
Through your prism to say what's going on and what Hamas did, and clearly the United States.
Some of you probably heard me say this, is that I'm not sure that when we see an ETF approval, that we're actually going to see a long-term adoption of when I say long-term, over that short term.
And so I do believe defense are spending towards, in the short run, for more AI and more chips. This is all just accelerating. And this is one of the fundamental reasons why I believe inflation is going to be here for longer, stickier, but it's not going to be to the 1970s again, but it's going to be elevated above the 2% target.
Think they'll change the target?
I'm against target, so because there was a time when inflation was below the 2% target, and they tolerated it, and I think there's going to be a time if we could ever get it down with firmness, a 3% level of inflation for a long period of time. you know, they're going to.
What's the magic? What's the magic of 2%?
Well, I don't know what the magic of 3. I mean, to me, 3 is actually a better inflation rate.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you look at what food costs are going up, if you look at what's going on related to housing, that is more than 2 or 3%. We're talking 6, 7, 8% type of growth rates in these things. And so many Americans are feeling the pain of rising inflation.
But from America to the rest of the world, you have been traveling quite a bit.
Yes.
Where is the world flowing their money? Where are investments that you think are legitimate and have a longer vapor trail?
Well, I would say the industries and the companies that are continuing to transform itself, some of the tech companies like NVIDIA, some of the pharma companies like Eli Lilly, some of the defense companies.
But that's U.S.
That's U.S. Now, in the world, we just were with $23 trillion of global investors in Japan 2 weeks ago. And the opportunity in Japan is breathtaking because you're starting to see the Japanese economy move out of its 25-year tailspin.
It's about time.
And the stocks are really cheap. And they're undervalued, and all the investors came away saying, we got to refocus on Japan. But then you got India, you got Mexico. Think about where all the reshoring of, as companies are looking to diversify away from China, you're seeing that companies are moving to Vietnam, they're moving to India, they're moving to the Philippines, they're moving to Mexico. Mexico has had phenomenal GDP growth over the last year and a half. And that's a lot of these companies are moving there for nearshoring.
Let me ask you about the Middle East, because you've tweeted, you've made statements in support of Israel very forcefully. I've noticed that some of your brethren in the CEO community have not. You know, I literally remember Jamie Dimon taking a knee with Black Lives Matter. What is going on here? I mean,
I don't focus on other people. I got to focus on what we're doing. And we had outrage. We're horrified by the images.
Right.
The world needs to get back its moral compass. I did a town hall to all the BlackRock employees today, and I asked every one of the BlackRock citizens to focus on how can you improve humanity? How can we bring down the heat of hatred and fear? And the problem is hatred and fear is growing. And BlackRock, as the largest retirement manager in the world, we have to focus on hope.
Yeah.
Because why would anybody take their money out of a money market fund that's earning 5.5% to invest in the long run? It is about hoping and believing that the future is better.
I like money market returns right now.
I do too. But there are a lot of things I like right now. But
are they afraid you're some of these CEOs from standing up for Israel? It seems like such an obvious thing to do.
I'm standing up against bigotry and hatred. I'm standing up against all means of bigotry and hatred.
Well, always, Larry.
Always.
But right now,
this is not any different, but I spoke out loudly.
You've got Bill Ackman of Pershing Square, Mark Rowan of Apollo Global, saying what is going on at our alma maters of Harvard and UPenn. And now John Huntsman. John Huntsman, the former governor of Utah, former ambassador to Russia, China, Singapore. They're done. These are all billionaires, some Jewish, some not. And look, you're an alum of UCLA.
Yes.
Last week, there was a professor at UCLA who gave extra credit to students who would attend a pro-Palestinian rally. And look, we're all for free speech, et cetera, but there is not a moral equivalent or any kind of symmetry between, hey, what's going on in the Middle East versus what happened to Israel on October 7th.
Totally agree with that.
Will you not give UCLA money anymore until they get this together?
I'm not sure specifically. As a board member at NYU, we were loud and specific and immediate in terms of stopping any of that support of hatred. And at BlackRock, we have a long history of making sure when we recruit young people, and last year we recruited 575 incredible, young men and women to join the firm, and we always, do a pretty deep, broad background check. We would never hire anybody. This is not just because of this event. We try to making sure that we are hiring people who believe in civility, who believe in humanity, and are not, voicing opinions of hatred and terrorism.
Okay.
And so this is not any change for us.
We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, much more with Larry Fink and Charlie Gasparino. But in the meantime,
all right, we'll listen in and see if there is anything else with Fink on this. I mean, they kind of pivoted that conversation away from Bitcoin a little bit, obviously for known reasons. Of course, some of the things that you guys have to remember is the last time that we had a major ETF, when you look at a similar splash into the market, and that was the gold ETF, BlackRock also part of that, and immediate impact on what happened within the gold markets. And I think this is the factor that Larry Fink mentioned there at the beginning of the interview, and that is that there's pent-up demand. Now, I would love you guys' feedback on this. Do you think there's enough pent-up demand to cause major adoption curves to occur? Because this is the point that I've been making for some time, is that I think, yes, we're going to see an immediate market push. I think just this fake news today showed that the market was primed and ready. But do we get something that is a sustained move? Now, Fink was talking about a lot of influential capacity of the market and what was being charged against it, meaning the fact that we've got, a lot of new tech, a lot of new pharma, a lot of new things happening on a global front outside the Middle East that are affecting in a positive way. So he's still talking kind of a hopium bag, I think, overall. But the macro side of this thing is the scenario that concerns me. And of course, that is going to continue to be jobs and all of that. I think he said, you've got one thing? Okay, we got a poll coming in. All right, let's take a look at the poll. All right, so will Bitcoin ETF launch this week? Yes or no? So 64 still holding off on no. All right, so that's a lot of votes too on that one. I don't know, guys. Could this be a dry run? I mean, sometimes markets like to see how things respond to certain things. Now, I obviously I don't want to get into conspiracy because that's a little crazy, but the point being is that there's always scenarios that play out in this. Just like, for instance, the liquidity we saw in a very short period of time on Bitcoin and the charts itself. So very interesting times for sure. Let me know. Okay, back to the point I was making is that if you look at a Bitcoin ETF that does get approved, and if you look at what Eric Balchunas and Jeff have said from Bloomberg, is that they've accelerated this up to like a 90% approval for this year. That's pretty significant in leaping forward just because of what happened with the Grayscale situation in the SEC not filing for an appeal. If all of that, and for some of you guys, maybe that it's brand new and you go, what is all this about? It's really boiling down to one thing, and that is, when does a Bitcoin ETF get approved? Grayscale now looks as though they've won the lawsuit and most likely will get some sort of approval because the SEC has yet to pull back and come in with an appeal, and they missed their deadline. Now, there's still some things that could happen with that, but it's very likely that they could be, maybe Grayscale is the first one. Do you think Grayscale will be the first one? Do you feel like this is going to kind of come together with a lot of people, meaning a lot of these ETFs that have filed all at once? Kind of curious what you guys' thoughts might be. We'll take a few questions, and we may go back to Larry Fink if he jumps back on Bitcoin and talk about that. But just to let you guys know, Bitcoin whipsawed by a false report claiming SEC approval or ETF. One thing to be aware of this, and John Deaton tweeted about this earlier, and that was if Gensler uses this as a chopping block, saying, look, here's the kind of manipulation that is in the market. I always argue against that because I've seen this kind of manipulation in the traditional finance markets for the last, multi-decades. You see this happen on stocks and IPOs of all sorts, and it's not something new. So this is just the market responding to the potential of what Fink was, of course, getting to, and that is that there's a lot of pent-up demand going for us. All right, a couple of questions. I think we can go to a few of those for you guys. Nico says ETFs will help, but not necessarily the silver bullet. I would agree with you, Nico. I think this is one of those things where we see a short-term pump, and then depending on the macro effect of what's happening globally, if we do see a situation where inflation continues to rise and we do see more job loss, I hate to say that, but that most likely will give the indicator to, of course, the Fed, and that's going to get us into a pivot, which will mean printing. And that, to me, is the point when you're going to start to see the market shake loose a little bit. All right. Tom W says, Gary grasping at straws now. He'll say whatever he needs to say to delay. I don't know. That's another factor because there's a lot of political issues that Gensler is really under right now. One is the number of losses that he's taken in a short period of time, really over the last 3 months. The likelihood of the Coinbase trial most likely getting sidestepped, because that'll be, I think, one of the critical losses that Gensler's office will take. If that does happen, then we could see, and we even talked about this the other day, is we could see Gary Gensler, I think it was the Van Eck guy, said that he anticipated Gensler to be ousted before the end of the year. Guys, here we are. It's the middle of October. So that would be interesting if that were to happen as well. Let's see, what else? I like this. Okay, so some of you guys not trusting Cointelegraph much anymore. I think, listen, this is just a good dry run that you guys should all put yourselves through, and that is when these things are going to move quickly. Because remember, news, especially in this market, in crypto, accelerates the market so quickly because the fundamental nature behind how these things go is mostly on market sentiment, and news usually drives sentiment. It's the things we track in our own market sentiment index is the same exact scenario that plays out. And of course, when you look back at the charts, going back to Bitcoin right now, continuing to see a pretty significant move. We're sitting here on the daily. Let me jump over to the hourly and see what kind of moves we are right now. So the first red candle starting to appear right now, but holding at that 28.4 run right now. And again, this is kind of the scenario. Remember, ETH a little bit less sensitive to it. The one that I've been watching is a Solana move. Now remember, Solana has a lot happening because of Breakpoint. Breakpoint is their big conference. For many of you, if you're brand new listening, you're like, hey, maybe Solana's going to be looking at a move. Remember that a lot of things were announced last year at Breakpoint, and then what happened? The FTX debacle. So do we see some major moves with Solana coming in with what they reveal at Breakpoint? We're going to try to have a lot of the, we'll call them Solana developers that are going to be developing on projects. Many of those you guys have seen. I think we got the Hive Mapper team on and some other people coming on from that ecosystem that could prove to be very interesting going forward. Let's see what else he's talking about back here on Fox News. Let's go back in. Maybe we will. Looks like they're still chatting. Yeah. All right, so another thing, of course, it looks like they're breaking away now. Yeah, looks like they're breaking away now. All right, guys, so here's the thing. We're going to continue to try to break some of these lives down for you, give you guys some insights on this. Mainly the takeaway for today is the market is prepped and ready. We are going to see a pretty significant bump when that does occur. Are you going into Bitcoin right now? Let me know. Drop some comments down below. Or are you going to sit on the sidelines for this ETF pump and most likely either market level off or dump? Kind of curious what you guys think. Drop some comments, as I said, down below. If you guys are not in the Diamond Circle, get in there now. It's one of the best places you get additional content. We do some trading videos over there, and then we also do some additional content that you can't get here on YouTube. So make sure and check it all out. We'll leave a link down below if you guys want to catch me out there on X. It's @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.